Julie Sullivan, President of the University of St. Thomas, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first Friday speaker series. Today we are pleased to welcome Mike Roman, Chairman of the Board and Chief Executive Officer at 3M. As Minnesotans, we are proud to call 3M a part of our local community, and we have seen the critical role 3M has played this past year in fighting the global COVID-19 pandemic, with N95 respirators and supporting the development and manufacturing of vaccines and therapeutics. A science-based Fortune 500 company with global reach, 3M is a pillar of our local community here in Minnesota, and St. Thomas is proud to be one of their long-standing partners. Nearly 1,000 Tommies work at 3M today, as do nearly 400 parents of Tommies. Every year, 3M is a top employer of our graduates, and hundreds of 3M leaders have completed MBAs and other degree and continuing education programs at St. Thomas. We are very proud to have our alumni contributing to 3M's strong workforce. 3M and the University of St. Thomas share many important values, including our commitments to sustainability, inclusive excellence, and racial equity, all of which are important pillars in St. Thomas's 2025 strategic plan. We are very proud, if you haven't heard, that our new residence hall, Tommy East, has become the 7th building in the world to earn LEED Platinum designation. 3M's responsible corporate citizenship includes long-standing support for STEM education equity, both here in our own backyard and beyond. With Minnesota facing some of the largest equity and opportunity gaps in the country, 3M's leadership and partnerships that drive marked and enduring change are more critical now than ever. We at St. Thomas share this commitment to advancing STEM education equity with a goal of doubling the number of students of color in our STEM and engineering programs by 2030. One of the key drivers of this goal is our planned STEAM complex, a new construction state-of-the-art facility that will be welcoming to all, reciprocal to our community, and allow us to deliver new programs with our partners, driving increased diversity and equity in STEM education and in the STEM workforce. Above and beyond all else, the most important thing our two organizations share is our commitment to drive long-term sustainable change for the common good, for both business and society. I'm now pleased to introduce to you Mike Roman. Mike is the Chairman of the Board and Chief Executive Officer of 3M, a $32 billion science-based company. He leads over 90,000 employees in nearly all countries. Mike became Chairman of the Board in May 2019 and Chief Executive Officer in July 2018. In prior roles, he served as Chief Operating Officer, led 3M's largest business group, and was the company's Chief Strategist. Throughout his 30-year career at 3M, he has led businesses around the world, including the United States, Europe, and Asia. Mike joined 3M in 1988 as a senior design engineer. Before we hear from Mike, we'll view a brief video from 3M.
My daughter, she works in healthcare. She said for her to do her job, she needs us to do ours. Oh, I think about it every day as a mom. That makes what I'm doing feel so important. The more N95 respirators we can get out, the more we can help her and everybody else.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sullivan. That video just is always a great reminder of the importance of what we've been doing throughout the pandemic as a company. And it's behind what I've said all year about how proud I am of 3Mers for the way that they've stepped up in response to the pandemic and all the challenges that it presents. I'll come back to a little bit of a view of some of what we've been doing as we went through the year and how it's changing us as a company as I go through my talk. I want to thank Dr. Sullivan and really all the Tommies on the line today for inviting me to the First Friday series and to be part of today's event. I'm really looking forward to sharing a little bit about 3M and then having a discussion and some I think some thoughtful Q&A and a fireside chat. So I thought I'd start with this idea of growing ideas and really growth behind it. And growth is critically important to large public companies like 3M. It is a reflection of our success with our customers. If we're growing, we are by definition doing better with our customers. It's vital to how we create value for our shareholders. Delivering on growth enables us to do more, to really grow the value for our shareholders, that they're, to realize a return on their investment. It's critical for attracting top talent to 3M. People want to come to a company that's winning, a company that's growing, a company that's successful. It's also important for retaining talent. It helps us create career opportunities long-term as a company. It's also front and center in successful business partnerships. And we don't operate only within the walls of 3M. We partner with many companies. And also, as you saw in 2020, we work in public-private partnerships to ensure success. And growth is an important part of enabling that. And finally, it supports investments in the communities that we're part of. And that is fundamental to who we are as a company. We are in many communities around the world. We manufacture, for example, in 29 states, 80 factories in 29 states here in the United States. So in being able to continue to invest in those communities, that growth is critical. And for us, growth as a business, growth as a company starts with our innovation. It's really how we differentiate ourselves in the markets, how we create the opportunity for growth. And behind that are the ideas that drive that innovation. So this idea of growth and the focus on growing ideas is critically important. Next slide, please. And this starts our innovation, our growth, our ideas and creativity starts with our vision and our purpose as a company. And the short version of that is applying science to improve lives. That's a purpose that drives us. It drives us in everything we do. Every business, we look to make a difference in people's lives. In our healthcare businesses, in our safety and industrial businesses where the fight for the pandemic has been front and center, in our transportation and electronics businesses and innovating for the future of the world, and in our consumer business where we're directly impacting the lives of consumers. This idea of really making a difference using our innovation for that purpose of improving lives is where it all starts. And you have seen many 3M products. You probably know more often some of our consumer products. I would tell you, people around the world are very nearly all day within 3 meters of a 3M product, and most of the time without knowing it. We have products embedded in devices, in your home, in your office, every part of your experience. We have product that is close to you and making a difference in your lives. And it gives us a lot of opportunity to really live up to that vision and that purpose. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So we are known for some technology platforms. One of those, our adhesive technology platform. And this is used in transportation, in aviation, in automobiles, in construction of residences and commercial properties to really make the result stronger, more durable, able to last longer in the use. And this is our adhesive technology making a difference, replacing mechanical fasteners, also importantly, enabling the use of new materials in the construction of all these different kinds of finished products that you might know. So your mobile devices will very often have 3M adhesives holding them together, helping to make them thinner, enabling better performance in the displays, all part of what we bring with those adhesive technologies. We also have adhesive technologies that enable our dressings and bandages to be used on even the most sensitive skin. Really a different end of innovation in our adhesive spectrum. We also have adhesives in some of the products you'd be familiar with. Post-it notes and Scotch tape are all benefiting from our innovation in adhesives. And this isn't a static set of solutions. We are constantly moving ahead to enable adhesive solutions as the world changes, as the construction of products changes, as our homes and materials that we use in our homes change. So it's a great place for us to continue to innovate to improve lives. Another example that's been front and center in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic has been our non-woven platform. Our non-woven technologies are utilized to really design and innovate in our market-leading N95 respirators, so critical to frontline healthcare workers and first responders in fighting the pandemic. It's also, this non-woven technology is used in our Filtrete brand filters, which has been one of those areas that has been a big focus for people as they spend more time at home, indoor air quality and improving that. And what we can do with our non-woven technology is very powerful there. We also use it in acoustic insulation, in automobiles, in aerospace applications to help quiet environments and to help really solve noise, vibration, and harshness challenges inherent in the use of some of those products. We also use our non-wovens in areas like our abrasives and in home cleaning products like our Scotch-Brite pads. So that non-woven technology, like our adhesives, has found many places where it can innovate to improve lives. And so this is really good examples, I think, of how we use science to solve the world's challenges and to help our customers solve their innovation needs as well. Next slide, please. And in 2020, one of the dynamics we saw in the middle of the pandemic is the acceleration of the pace of change. Something that has been, I would say, accelerating even coming into the pandemic, the changes in the world that are driving the need for additional innovation. In the pandemic, there were clearly immediate needs in fighting the pandemic, which is a big part of what we focused on. There were also other trends that accelerated, and everybody has seen the digital first world ramp up. And this may not be an exaggeration, that we advanced 10 years in 1 year because of the need for us to work remotely, to have safe and social distancing. These are all drivers of accelerated change. And there were many others. We saw markets where home improvement, as I already noted, people are spending more time at home. They are focused on innovations at home, driving accelerated change. We see dynamics in areas that had already been a focus around things like sustainability and the electrification of our transportation networks. That accelerated in 2020. And those are all areas that are critical for us to drive innovation and make a difference. And so while we were fighting the pandemic and working to help support frontline healthcare workers and first responders and managing the uncertainty of the economic disruption that we were facing, all businesses were facing, we were also investing in the future, where these trends were taking us, where this accelerated change was taking us. And we talked all year with our investors, with our employees, with our partners about how we are prioritizing investments in new growth opportunities where the needs were greatest, in greater efficiency as a company, ramping up production, being able to serve our customers in the middle of such a dynamic environment, and also in the area of sustainability, as that became a bigger and more important focus going through the year. And not only a focus in certain circles, it was a focus across our stakeholders, our customers, our employees, our shareholders, our business partners, the communities we're part of, everyone putting a focus on sustainability, a bigger and more important focus on that. So it was important for us to continue to invest in those areas as we manage through that change. Next slide, please. So responding to COVID-19, it was really a year ago, almost to this week, we were putting our focus on three critical priorities at 3M. The first was protecting our employees. Across our company, we were essential workers. we had to continue operating. All of our factories around the world essentially had to continue to operate. Our people in our businesses and all of our functions really needed to be able to continue to operate. And focusing on employee safety became first and foremost, whether that meant new protocols in our factories and safe distancing and new cleaning and disinfectant approaches, things that could keep our factories operating, to having nearly half our employees move to working remotely, as many companies experienced around the world. This was first and foremost what we had to focus on. Second is fighting the pandemic. And we talked about fighting the pandemic from every angle, and starting with delivering as many N95 respirators as we could possibly produce to frontline healthcare workers and first responders. And this is something that we have been focused on going back to the SARS pandemic almost 15 years ago. What is our role in the middle of this? And it had to be ready to bring on capacity and get it to the frontline healthcare workers. In normal times, most of our N95 production goes to industrial workers. 95% of our production goes to industrial workers. In the environment of a pandemic, we actually bring on capacity that we keep idle, to be prepared for pandemics. We bring that on, and when we bring that on, we shift over 90% of our production to frontline healthcare workers and first responders. And so we were doing that a year ago, and then we went after adding capacity. And by the end of 2020, we had increased our capacity globally fourfold. And we were at a run rate of 2.5 billion N95 respirators per year at the end of 2020. And you look back at the beginning of 2020, we were planning to produce somewhere south of 500 million respirators for the whole year. So that was an incredible step up. It goes beyond respirators. We are also a critical supplier of technology to aid the development and production of vaccines and therapeutics. And we stepped in many other places in our healthcare businesses, in our industrial businesses, in our consumer businesses to help make a difference in the middle of the pandemic, everywhere that we could make a difference. And that included really focusing on developing strong public-private partnerships, in many cases working with other private companies to just deliver even more solutions to the marketplace. And it meant stepping up into new roles. Fighting fraud around N95 respirators was a new area of focus for us, stepping into the spotlight as a company, taking on a bigger leadership role. The third priority we had as we continued to serve customers, we had to focus on our operations while we managed the uncertainty in the economy. We had to be ready to serve customers and deliver for our broader stakeholders, including our shareholders. So those three simple priorities kept us focused as we went through the year. And it's really with us today. It continues to be the priorities that we focus on. Next slide, please. And as I said, that another area that was accelerating in 2020 is, I would say, expectations around what we talk about as ESG. And this is investor language. It's the language of boards of directors for public companies as well. It's environment, social, and governance. It's what we do in those to lead in those areas. And the expectations were going up. The expectations in environment for manufacturers have been increasing. There's clearly a large focus on environment broadly, areas like climate change and the challenges related to that, important for companies to step up. And investors are making choices based on that. Customers are making choices. Certainly employees are choosing to work for companies that are providing leadership and being a leader in a way that they can be proud of. Social has been a big focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, something that as a company, as a global company in particular, we have made this a priority for years, and we've made progress and good progress in that area. In the events of 2020, that became an even bigger focus. With the killing of George Floyd here in the Twin Cities, that stepped up big time. It hit 3Mers hard. It really, I think, brought a strong voice to the expectations and that there was a demand to do more. And as we went out and listened and developed better understanding, it really put some clarity on what it was going to take to step up in those areas. And becomes another dimension to diversity, equity, inclusion is social justice. And it was clear there's a call to action for companies. Companies can bring critical capabilities to the fight for racial justice. We can make a difference. And for 3M, it became very important to act to make a difference, to step up as a company, to step up as leaders in a company to make a difference. And we made the decision to focus on areas that we can make a difference, leveraging the strengths of 3M. Where can we really advance social justice? And so we've identified some areas that leverage 3M strengths. One of those areas is racial justice for the future of work and how we can help support STEM education and economic opportunities. As I said, we are a manufacturer in 29 states. We have an opportunity to make a difference. And we're putting a special focus here in the Twin Cities. We've got strong partners in the community, and we made a commitment in terms of people and priority and investment that we know will help drive this. We're leveraging what companies know how to do. Once we set it as a priority, we have clear goals, we put plans in place, we dedicate resources, and we hold ourselves accountable. So in the social DE&I, social justice area, important for us to step up and lead. And governance is important too. It's another critical aspect of companies really making sure that we continue to lead with unwavering integrity. And I'll come back to that as an important part of our culture at 3M and how we think about advancing our culture in the future as well. Next slide, please. So it comes back to really a focus for us on our innovation to make a difference. And there's a concept that I like to keep in front of us, and it's important for me as a leader, what motivates me and what I focus on in 3M. What can I do to help unleash our potential to deliver for our stakeholders, our customers, our shareholders, our employees, our business partners in the communities that we're part of, and deliver to their expectations. And I remind our teams around the world all the time that these expectations are going up. Employees have greater expectations, our customers have greater expectations, the broader stakeholders, they all are looking for more from 3M. So it's really, our innovation is a great strength for us to be able to build on. It's a focus for us as we look to meet those increased expectations. Next slide, please. And so I want to wrap up with just a few words about our culture. And what you see here is something we activated as we were looking at other significant changes in the company. We saw the need to, we were in the middle of transforming our digital capabilities as a company and deploying a new ERP and digital ecosystem across the enterprise. We saw a need and an opportunity to really move 3M forward with new operating model changes. And at the start of those changes, it was important that we put a focus on culture, that we were thinking about people and culture as a way to enable the changes as opposed to something to address as we went through the changes. And so we activated our culture focus first. And this is where we started. We started with 5 areas that are, I would say, strengths historically of 3M that also represent aspirational goals to do even more, to get better, to be a better version of 3M as we move ahead. Putting customer at our core and everything we do. It's what has helped enable the innovation that's built the company. It's where we need to go even further. The expectations are higher. Innovating more boldly, taking our innovation in new directions. The world is changing fast. The digital world is creating new opportunities. We have to think about new areas to innovate boldly. This Powered by Inclusion really brings a strong focus on all of us as a company thinking about the culture behind social justice and DE&I, that we are thinking about how to advance our culture in that area as well. And as I've mentioned, we put a focus even in the middle of the pandemic on prioritizing investments to become more efficient and agile in what we do. It's an interesting dynamic in the pandemic. The fixed deadlines that we had, the fast moving dynamics that we were facing, we were being forced to make decisions more quickly than ever before. I think it gave us confidence in our ability to even be more agile. And it put a premium on having clear use and view of data and analytics at the foundation of that. And finally, fundamentally, the values of 3M are what enables us to be successful over the long run. And this unwavering integrity, I often talk about trust. One of the virtues of capitalism is companies don't succeed if they aren't trusted by their stakeholders. If your customers don't trust you, you won't have a business. If employees don't trust you, they won't be part of the company. You have to continue to work on that, and unwavering integrity. No one in our company has the right to let down our stakeholders, to give up our trust that we've worked so hard to earn. So keeping that front and center is critical. And so continuing to think about how we advance that and move that forward is foundational to ultimately being in a position to leverage our innovation to drive that growth that I started out my remarks about. So with that, I think I'll stop there. Next slide. I think I have a land back on improving, applying science to improve lives. And I'll just say thank you again to everyone on the event today. I look forward to the discussion now as we have some time for Q&A. And thank you for listening to me about some of the exciting things. And I think some of the things that I'm most proud of that we're doing at 3M. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. And it was a wonderful glimpse into, I would say, the 3M of today and the many exciting opportunities and challenges that you also face, but how you've innovated to remain a leader in this dynamic environment we're in. So we'll come back to several of the topics that you raised, but before we do, excuse me, I'd like to talk just a little bit more about you and your journey. You joined 3M, I believe, about 30 years ago as with an electrical engineering degree, and your first job was as a lab manager. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? I mean, what a tremendous journey over those 30 years to now be the CEO and chairman of 3M. Were there key milestones as you reflect on this journey that were maybe pivotal to your career?
Yeah, it's something you do from time to time, reflecting on your career and what were the milestones, the turning points that made a difference. Some of them are really only visible in hindsight. Others you are working on yourself. You've got goals and ambitions, and you are endeavoring to make your own turning points. And I would say one of those is the decision to join 3M. I was working for another company as an engineer, and I was looking for an opportunity to, as an engineer, be able to lead business one day. And I was looking for companies that I could have that opportunity. And I was extremely fortunate to have an opportunity to talk with 3M. And I saw the way 3M grows businesses, builds businesses, as an opportunity for somebody with a technical background to be able to step into that kind of role. And so my first turning point was making the decision to come to 3M. It also was exciting as a global company to have the opportunity to work internationally. You highlighted some of my time overseas, and that was always something my wife and I really were excited about, the possibility. You never know if you're going to get the opportunity, and truthfully, you don't know if you're going to thrive in that kind of experience or not. But it turned out to be not only a great experience in my career, but it was also a great experience for my family and my children who were part of that as well. I think that was clearly a first turning point. As I was in 3M for a time, and it's an advice that I give people, mentees, as they talk to me about thinking about their career, is at some point you have to try to be objective, self-aware of who you are. What are your capabilities? Where can you be successful? And you want to line up your ambitions to enable you to be able to achieve those, and you have to leverage your strengths. You have to be able to compete in the opportunities that are out there. And you also want to be thinking about something that's important to the company that either you're considering joining or that you're part of today. And for me, I focused on leading business and business that I could leverage some of my strengths, but also where I could move ahead. And moving from the lab, as you said, as you mentioned, I joined 3M as a design engineer, moving to business it wasn't a well-worn path. There wasn't like a recipe to follow. You had to really work at that. You had to look for the opportunities. You had to engage people. Now, the great thing about 3M is there are so many people that support you, give you the benefit of their experiences and wisdom. They give you support as you go. And I would say the turning point for me then was my first chance to lead a business. And that was incredible opportunity. And it led to other opportunities to lead businesses, including an international, and it became a big jump off point. It was something I was working on, and I knew it was a turning point when I got the chance. You've got to build on it at that point, but it was certainly a big difference for me. And then I think like I talked about change accelerating in 2020, as you go through your career, I feel like the turning points accelerated. You're always learning so much new, especially in a global enterprise like 3M with all the dimensions that we have. I would say there were many, many turning points in terms of inflections in my own development and the things that make a difference for me today as CEO. I can point to many experiences that were important turning points that if I hadn't experienced some of those roles, I wouldn't be ready for some of the dimensions of the job and the challenges that we face in the world of business today.
Well, clearly you have found your natural habitat, and a habitat that I think at 3M has allowed you to continue learning and growing throughout your career, which is a wonderful blessing. Let's go back to some of the topics you raised in your presentation. And clearly 3M was in the global spotlight for the last year with the COVID-19 pandemic. And your leaders faced competing priorities. You obviously had to ramp up your manufacturing, your innovation, you were donating, but there were multiple demands on 3M from all types of stakeholders from all over the world. And are there enduring lessons for how you handled those competing demands or other challenges that you faced during the pandemic that will guide your leadership going forward?
I would say we're still capturing all of the lessons from 2020. That said, some are very powerful and have been with us from kind of the step where we have been learning and building on those capabilities. A great example is a little bit of what I touched on in my opening remarks. We were in the beginning, this time last year, we were working to ramp up our production of N95 respirators. At that point, we hadn't recognized other areas that we would be looked to lead, to make a difference. And it was a global pandemic is different than anything we've ever experienced in that business or in 3M looking to respond to a crisis. And this was just at a scale and scope. And there was more pressure, more dimensions of it that it was important for companies to step up. So I highlighted stepping up to help fight fraud. There were many bad actors out there either pretending to be 3M and committing to deliver tens of millions of respirators or selling N95s for 10, 20, 30 times the retail prices and really creating a lot of concern. People were very concerned about the pandemic and their safety, and we were working, all of us, to get product where it was needed. We had to step in and fight price gouging. At the same time, we fought to take down more than 10,000 counterfeit websites. And early days, I was spending a lot of time in conversations with government leaders around promises that these bad actors had given them and were not representing 3M. So it was important for us to step up. And that we've always, I would say we've had a history as a company globally of working with governments at all levels and working effectively with governments in partnerships, public-private partnerships. This was a whole new scale and a whole new dimension. And it taught us more of what we have to do as a company, as a private company, to make those partnerships work more effectively. And that was a learning that we will keep with us. There's a lot of aspects. Communication would be one aspect. How we communicate with government partners multiplied many-fold in terms of frequency and engagement, and even what we have to bring to the table. It's different. The expectation, that's another area, expectations have gone up. And it's like a lot of things in your life. Once you start performing at the next level, it starts to seem normal and it becomes something that you can be good at. And I think that's one of the transitions we've gone through, that different spotlight on our leadership, the expectations of what we have to do, the role that we need to play. That's certainly something that has changed us permanently and will be part of what we do. And there's a private side to that as too. For our history, a big portion of our innovation comes inside of 3M. It's intellectual property that we develop, R&D that we do, manufacturing process technologies we develop. In the middle of the pandemic, the number of private partners that we worked with to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise opened our eyes to the opportunity to do more in private company partnerships. And that's something we are pushing ahead. We're proactively using it to replicate across our businesses. And how do we really make a difference in our innovation with those other partnerships? So that's something that we won't go back. We won't go back to a lower level of partners. We'll be, I think, continuing to even increase that as we go. And then one other area, I'd be remiss if I don't touch on it, the digital acceleration in the world. Everybody sees it in digital commerce. You see it in tech stocks. You see it in the advancement of a lot of trends around applications of technology. For us, digital is and I'm a double E, as you mentioned. I've thought of digital as a electrical engineering definition. Digital means many different things to a company. We talk about digital enterprise and our fundamental information technology and where that's going. We talk about digital operations. How do we work end to end in our factories in a digital world? We talk about digital products and solving our customers' needs through digital solutions in addition to material science. And we talk about digital customers, digital commerce, digital engagement. And so that acceleration has changed 3M. And it was change we would have eventually gone through, but we were under accelerated deadlines in 2020. And that is something that I think is a strength now as we move forward, the confidence, not so much that where we are, that we're where we need to be yet, but the confidence that we can make that change, that we can really drive those advantages in those digital strategies that we saw the acceleration on in 2020.
Well, I think you identified two key themes that I am hearing from a number of business leaders and also within higher ed of really the understanding that we are all interdependent and our future will require more partnerships and collaborations around the world. And then the digitization of everything that we do. As you say, we're not going back there. And it is changing how we interact with one another and many things about our life. And so many fun opportunities ahead.
I agree.
Let me switch gears a little bit. You've come out with a very major commitment to climate change in terms of your commitment to being carbon neutral by 2050, and with a company as large as 3M and with a huge global footprint, that's a very ambitious goal. And then also you've expressed a commitment to improvements in water quality and use. Can you give us a little more specificity about some areas that you might be pursuing in the future growth areas, either within or beyond those commitments?
Yeah, it's such an important priority for us. I talked about it being part of our values. It's part of our legacy as a company. We've long been a leader in sustainability. We launched Pollution Prevention Pays multiple decades ago to eliminate waste at the source, at the manufacturing process. We recognized as a manufacturer, it was our responsibility to step in and do that. We saw a leadership role. It became part of how we thought about innovation. We have reduced our own greenhouse gas emissions by more than 60% over the last 2 decades, focusing on efficiency, focusing on our energy sources. We announced publicly taking our 3M headquarters here to renewable electricity, 100%. And we did that about 2 years ago now. And so there's been multiple steps. We also have had a focus on how do we lead forward, and again, as a company, as a manufacturer, how do we lead forward in air, water, and waste in our operations? How do we improve the air quality from our footprint, greenhouse gas emissions and beyond. How do we improve waste? We have a goal to have our factories be zero landfill waste. We have 200 factories worldwide approximately, and a third of them today are zero landfill waste. We are driving innovation in our processes and capabilities to drive reuse and recycling. And then we have water, and we've got some new step up goals. We've had strong goals for our environmental plans for 2025 around water use and what we're doing at a factory by factory basis. We saw a need to do more. As we came through, and this was in the middle of 2020, we looked at ESG and we said, this is a business priority. It's one of our top 3 priorities as a company. In addition to growth and delivering on our commitments, we have to lead in ESG. We have to endeavor to be best in class. And as a manufacturer, it's especially important. People expect us to, and there are different business models that don't have the kind of footprint we do. We have to step up and lead. And so we went after it like a business strategy. We said, what are our priorities? We looked at and listened to our stakeholders, said, where do you expect us to lead? Where do customers look for us to lead? Where do employees look to us to lead? Where do our investors look for us to lead? And we had our own view of where we had the biggest potential impact. And we prioritized the 2 areas that we just announced. We prioritized making a difference in the fight against the climate challenge. And what can we do as a manufacturer to drive carbon for a goal of carbon neutrality? And then we looked at water, and we had to accelerate our reduction in water use and improve the water quality, actually help to improve water quality in general. Remove even some of the substances that we find in the water when we first bring it into our factories. How do we do that? How do we make a difference? And we used our engineering capabilities to do that. There was a phrase that I heard from another company, and we took it to heart, which is, it's not good enough just to have a goal and commit yourself to something 30 years down the road. You have to have the math with a path and a plan, and you have to be able to execute it with confidence. And for us, that meant bending the curve. It was really important that we bent the curve on carbon neutrality in the first part of the commitment, not waiting till the end of the commitment. So how can we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030? How do we reduce it by 80% by 2040? And then how do we move beyond and leverage technology today? It's not waiting for a miracle to occur. It's what can we do and what we know how to operate. Same in water. We are deploying technology, state-of-the-art technology, but available today to drive that water use down. We will have that technology online by the end of 2023. We'll have it incrementally in different locations before that, but all of our plants that are dedicated to this by 2023, and we'll be optimizing it and really have it up to, we think, our targeted goals by the end of 2024. So it was important to us not only to lead and prioritize and execute, but like successful business teams do, you set goals, you lay out the plan, you aggressively go after it, and you hold yourselves accountable. And we made the announcement. It was fun to make the announcement, and now we're getting about the business of executing. And we had been, even before the announcement, we'd already been executing. We made the commitments. We talked about $1 billion. That's, once you make those kinds of priority decisions, you make that financial commitment, the teams are going after it. And so I'm really proud of it. And I think we can do even more. We've got a commitment that we have to drive to, but we'll continue to look at what leadership expectations will mean as we go forward.
Well, I appreciate your strategy. You have a long-term goal, but you've got to break that down into intermediate milestones and drive towards those, or you'll never reach your long-term goal. We also have a commitment to carbon neutrality as a University of St. Thomas, and have goals for each year to get there, and that's the only way we'll get there. And it's very important to our employees as well, as I'm sure it is to yours.
It is. Yeah. I feel a responsibility not to commit the future CEOs of 3M to something that we don't do our lion's share on. So that was the important part of bending the curve too. If we didn't get this off to the right start, then we're asking future 3Mers to take on a challenge that we put in front of them. We owe that to not only all of our stakeholders today, but also the future 3Mers as well.
For sure. So speaking of future 3Mers, You describe your employees as curious, smart, and motivated. So what do you think we should be thinking about at the University of St. Thomas and also our colleagues at other higher ed institutions in terms of preparing the future 3Mers? What should we be doing to ensure we're preparing them to lead and thrive in this future that you're creating for them?
Well, I think one of the things St. Thomas does well, extremely well, with what I've seen from the 3Mers that have come from St. Thomas is building skills, skills that are relevant to success in a business environment. And that's another piece of advice that I offered to 3Mers as they come into their career. Make sure you're in a role where you can build your knowledge and skills, as it's what's going to give you a stronger foundation for success in the future. It's what will enable you to use your judgment and even your intuition more effectively, is build out those skills and capabilities. So I think that's fundamentally an important role for universities. And I think, again, St. Thomas, that's a very strong focus for you and the people that graduate, the Tommies that come to 3M for sure. Another area that, and it actually came out of an invitation. I was invited my first year as CEO to speak at the commencement for my hometown university, and a small university in central Wisconsin. And I was thinking about the topic to speak about. That's something that would be meaningful and that you can do in 8 minutes or thereabouts. You don't want to go on too long. And so I was thinking about the question I'm often asked. I get asked the question, and I have, as I've become a more senior leader, you get the question, what was that helped you become successful? What was most important to your success in your career? And I used to always take the easy answer, which is, well, there's a long laundry list, this and this and this skill and that skill and this experience and that experience. And I said, well, if I really had to boil it down to one thing, what would it be? And for me, it became the speech that I gave at the commencement, which is leading change. And we talk often in 3M about embracing change. That's an important concept. I think you have to seek out change. And so I would encourage that as an important part of the process, the journey that students go on in university, all through education, but in university and certainly when they come to 3M is opening themselves up to change. How do you open people up to change? How do you open students at a university up to change? You encourage them to be curious, first of all. I think that's one of the most powerful ways. Encourage them to pursue broader understanding, multiple dimensions to the world around them, multiple dimensions to something they're interested in. If they're interested in a career area or a subject area, what are the different perspectives? I think that one of the challenges we face today with the media availability is you can spend all of your time reading things that you already agree with, and maybe even that you already know, and it just amplifies what you already know. If you're going to really lead into change, you have to be willing to look outside in. You have to be willing to be receptive to understanding and being able to position yourself against that change. And so being curious, opening yourself up. And one of the more tangible things that I encourage 3Mers whenever I talk on this topic is read books. Books are a powerful opportunity to reflect more deeply and open your mind up to bigger change. And read books outside your already preconceived ideas and really leverage that curiosity and use that as an opportunity. You're going to do a lot more when you read a 500-page book in terms of reflecting on and opening yourself up than you will if you read a 288-character opinion. So I think those are some of the things that I talk about encouraging in 3M. I think universities and students should be endeavoring to pursue as well.
Well, we couldn't agree with you more, and I think it's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on at St. Thomas in terms of creating engineers that don't just know engineering, creating scientists that don't just know science, but have a broader understanding of the world and of humanity and of culture and all of the things that really go into improving lives. It's not just a technical skill. It's an understanding of life.
Well-rounded used to be a positive concept And I think that's maybe well-rounded around the where the world is taking so many trends. Being ready for that change, that's an important concept. I applaud you for that.
Well, I had one more question, but before I get to it, there was an audience question that I was reminded of as you were just speaking. And one of our audience members wants to know if there's a particular book that you've read recently or you're reading now that has stuck with you. So it can't be an engineering book now that you've just told us that we have to read outside of our fields.
Well, I'm probably, and now that I think about it, I'm probably a little bit entrenched in this. I've always, not always, for much of my adult life, I've been in the habit of reading 3 types of books almost at once, because you can kind of switch back and forth with them when you're looking for something different. And so I like to read history books. I learn a lot from reading history books, and it's always fascinating. It's you learn a lot, and it helps you think differently about the future, I would say. So I really like some of that. One that's been a history book that I've been reading, that I actually read again this fall. I had read it once a number of years ago. I was doing a book club with our new employee network inside of 3M. And so I recommended it to them. It's called The Wizard and the Prophet. And it was kind of a historical story about the head, or really kind of I would say the founder or initial push behind the Green Revolution and also the environmental movement, and how they think about things differently. And it's a good example of a book where you kind of find yourself agreeing on all sides and disagreeing in areas. And it really it was a good book for opening up. It's a little different kind of history book. It was a little more technical in some ways, because they really get at some of the aspects of food production and climate and environment. But I found it really helpful, and I got a lot of energy from our new employees. And I had forgotten how long the book was when I recommended it to them. So it was one of their longer books, I think but they found it very interesting. So I think that's a book that I think I would recommend. It's one of those mind openers. One I'm reading right now, and I'm only maybe 25% through it, and it was Colson Whitehead. I think Colson was on 60 Minutes, and I hadn't read any of his books. And The Underground Railroad, which won a Pulitzer, I think he's the first American author to win back-to-back Pulitzers on 2 books in a row, is The Underground Railroad, and then The Nickel Boys, I believe, is the other one. And so I started this Underground Railroad. It's a fictional book based on a lot of real life experiences in the Underground Railroad in the United States. And I think for me, it's been very interesting. It's a fun read. He's an incredible author, and I'm sure I will. I tend to do that once I read an author's book, and then I read all of their books until I'm done with it. I do that often in fiction. One of the areas of fiction I like is action adventure. Vince Flynn, a Twin Cities author, I've read every Vince Flynn book, and I think I recommend that to anybody who likes that genre. I think Vince Flynn is an incredible writer, or was an incredible writer. We lost him way too early, but those are some examples. In the middle of that, I like to read business books. I think the last one I'd recommend was The $1 Trillion Coach, which is really about a coach, Bill Campbell, who made a difference in $1 trillion, probably now $3 trillion of market cap in Apple Computer and Google and Intuit companies in Silicon Valley, and the former Columbia University football coach who became coach to tech leaders. And so I had actually had my entire senior leadership team read it now about a year and a half ago as part of a workshop that we did. So I think those are a few recent notable ones that I feel okay recommending.
Well, thank you for the recommendations, and I'm sure many in our audience, if they haven't read those, will be looking for them. I spent most of my life reading. I always had my nose in a book. In fact, I grew up in a small, a rural area where I actually almost stepped on a coral snake because I was walking and reading a book at the same time. But
this is before texting, walking and texting.
So I used to read biographies. I read every biography I could get my hands on because I wanted to understand people and the secrets to their passions and the things they pursued and accomplished. So I don't read engineering books, I must say. So, but thank you very much. We appreciate that. Well, I do want to go back to your DEI commitment, Mike. You've really stepped forward as a leader of 3M. You've done some major things. You've issued your first ever Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion report. Mm-hmm. You've appointed a Chief Equity Officer. And you've launched a commitment of $50 million to really address racial opportunity gaps. And we'd like to hear you describe a little bit more about what you think is needed for 3M really to achieve their vision of more diversity, equity, and inclusion within 3M and beyond, clearly. Yeah.
I would say, it's another one of those areas where we had a legacy and leadership of putting a focus on it, a priority on it. And we were making good progress. We had notable progress in gender equity. We had other areas, as we become more transparent, that we've got work to do. There's more that we need to do. And that was an important part of how we thought about it. And we had made this a priority. We were really looking at what do our next set of goals need to be. We knew we had to be more open and engaging. I formed, when I came in as CEO, what we call the CEO Inclusion Council. So this is a collection of our leaders of our employee resource networks, other leaders in the executive ranks, focused broadly on inclusion and within that, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that was a foundational step. And I would say one of the things that came out of that group, and it was also articulated by our board as well, is that we as a company, we as leaders in the company, we didn't need to demand more of ourselves, that there's more that we can do, we need to do. And I think that was a really important push, that while we were making progress, we needed to demand more. And as we were talking and thinking about that and looking at what our goals were going to be and how we were going to become more accountable in doing that, we had George Floyd. And as I said earlier, it hit us hard, hit 3Mers hard. And it was a call to action. And it's not one of those things that, and I remember the early days, and I had been the sponsor of our African American network for a number of years in 3M. So I'm corresponding and talking with our leaders there. And what it became clear is the first things we had to do were listen. And like I think everybody kind of figured out pretty quickly, it was important to listen and listen to the voices that mattered. More importantly for us was develop a deeper understanding of what demand more needs to look like. And that was a journey we went on. And we made a commitment early that we were going to step up. We were going to make a difference in our investments. We were going to dedicate resources to it. We knew we needed to add leadership to be able to do that. We put a dedicated director on our social justice platform and what we were going to drive in social justice around racial justice for the future of work. How do we do that? How do we really set the goals that will make a difference? How do we leverage, as I said earlier, 3M strengths? And where do we focus? And making that decision to put a priority focus on the Twin Cities, in particular, the St. Paul side of the Twin Cities, with the partners that we have now identified and are working with. And then this idea of DE&I, there were a couple big areas that were important. We, as you said, we brought in a new leader around equity and community, really brought great experience and how to really follow through on this demand for more. And we set some bold goals, really focusing on where we hadn't made the progress we needed to, underrepresented groups in 3M. It's difficult for 3M to play an important leadership role in the community if you have things that you aren't addressing in the company. It was important that we step up, and creating a more inclusive 3M, as I talked about in our culture, was where we knew we had to aspire to do more. How do we do that? So this idea of setting bold goals, and you saw that in our global DE&I report, doubling our underrepresented groups, doubling the leadership ranks of our underrepresented groups, in committing to that and dedicating the resources, dedicating the budgets, and building the teams that would make a difference. And that became like I talked about environmental and ESG broadly, it became a business strategic priority, and we're going to manage it that way. We've got goals, we're going to hold ourselves accountable. That report was the first step in being more transparent. We know there's more to do. So we'll continue to demand more and move forward. But I'm excited with the energy on our teams and the leadership we have in place. We had I had a chance to be with them this week as they were really, I would say, stepping up and stepping on the gas in the work streams that they're driving. The leadership there is very energized and making great progress. So I have a lot of confidence that we are moving in the direction of delivering on that demand more expectation.
Well, thank you very much for your leadership in this area. We all know that it's a very important area for all of us to listen, learn, but be willing to act and be willing to put our energy and our resources behind those actions. So thank you very much for being a leader and for partnering with people locally as well as beyond. We appreciate it very much. So Mike, this has been a great conversation. It's been wonderful to learn a little bit more about you and about 3M. And we want to thank you very, very much for being with us today. We're blessed to have you as a leader in our community. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and all the best to the Tommies out there in the audience and the Zoom network. So thank you again, and have a great weekend.
Same to you. Take care. So, and thank you to our audience for joining us today. Our next First Friday will be in May, as we will be celebrating Good Friday, the first Friday in April. But please save the date for May 7th, as Phil Eston, our Vice President and Director of Athletics, will be welcoming the commissioners of the 4 athletic conferences that will be joining this fall as part of our historic transition to Division I. This promises to be a very interesting and engaging conversation. So until then, stay safe and be well.